It was a quiet evening in Atlanta, Georgia. In his sprawling home, Charles Chuck Garrison poured himself a glass of whiskey, settling into the life he had built, the life he had always wanted. 8 years ago, his wife, Denise Garrison, had vanished, presumed dead. Chuck had played the grieving husband perfectly, holding vigils, giving interviews, consoling friends and family. And then he had moved on. A new wife, a growing business, more money than ever. Everything had worked out perfectly until that night. Until the knock. It was just past 9 p.m. Chuck had no visitors planned, no deliveries expected. His new wife was out of town visiting family. He frowned as he set his drink down. Who the hell was knocking this late? Chuck moved toward the door, his steps slow, cautious. Another knock came, firm and deliberate. Chuck peered through the peephole, and his breath caught in his throat. He staggered back, his grip tightening on the door handle. No, it wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Denise, standing there, alive. Chuck's body locked up. His heart pounded. He had buried her. He had watched the dirt cover her body. For 8 years, he had lived knowing that Denise Garrison was dead. And yet, she was standing on his porch. Her pink dress was perfectly pressed, her hair neatly styled. She wasn't dirty, disheveled, or broken. But there was something, bruises, faint but visible, around her arms, a scar near her collarbone, and those eyes that knew something, eyes that said she remembered. A smile crept onto her lips. "Hey, baby." Chuck couldn't breathe. Denise tilted her head slightly. "Miss me?" Chuck's fingers twitched, his mind raced. This was a trick, a hallucination, a nightmare. Denise was dead. She had to be. For the first time in years, fear crept into his chest. Denise stepped forward, too close, too real. Chuck's voice finally cracked through the silence. "What? How?" His knees nearly buckled. Denise's smile didn't fade. She wasn't here to explain. She was here to watch him squirm. The past had finally caught up, and Chuck Garrison knew it. His perfect life was over. Denise had come back, and she had a story to tell. To the outside world, Charles Chuck Garrison and Denise Garrison had a picture-perfect marriage. A beautiful home, financial success, a reputation as a respectable, thriving couple. Chuck, a well-known real estate developer, had built a name for himself. People trusted him. His handshake sealed deals, and his charm made him impossible to doubt. Denise, a former nurse, was the heart of their home, smart, independent, and fiercely loyal. Together they looked like a power couple, but behind closed doors, their marriage was crumbling, and only Denise knew the truth. Chuck had always been magnetic, the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything. His voice was smooth, his smile disarming. People liked him, trusted him, wanted to be around him. Denise had fallen for it once when they first met. Chuck had swept her off her feet, flowers, romantic dinners, thoughtful surprises. He made her feel special. She was 26, working the night shift at the hospital. He was 31, already making big moves in real estate. He promised her a good life, stability, love, and for a while he delivered. But love fades when the lies begin. Chuck never stayed loyal for long. The late nights at the office, they weren't for work. The weekend business trips, he never traveled alone. Denise wasn't naive. She saw the lipstick stains that weren't hers, found texts, hotel receipts, the little clues he was too arrogant to cover up. She confronted him again and again, and every time, Chuck played his part perfectly. "It's not what you think, baby. You're the only one I love." She meant nothing. Then he'd show up with flowers, a new bracelet, a weekend getaway. And for a while, she let herself believe him, because marriage was worth fighting for, because she thought he would change, because Chuck always knew how to make her stay. But deep down, she knew the truth. Chuck wasn't going to stop, and Denise was running out of patience. Chuck's biggest addiction wasn't women, it was money, and he was terrible with it. He had a lavish lifestyle to maintain, fast cars, designer suits, expensive vacations. But behind the scenes, his finances were falling apart. Bad investments, shady real estate deals, borrowing more than he could pay back. Denise started noticing the red flags. maxed out credit cards, bank statements that didn't add up. Then came the worst discovery. Chuck had taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling her. He was bleeding money, and if Denise didn't step in, they were going to lose everything. Denise did what any responsible woman would do. She took control. She shut down accounts, canceled credit cards, and locked away their savings. She refused to let him destroy everything they had built. And Chuck hated her for it. For the first time in their marriage, he wasn't in control. He couldn't charm his way out. He couldn't spend freely. He was trapped, and the resentment festered. One night, Denise sat Chuck down. She was done. She was tired, and she was ready to leave. She looked him in the eyes. "I can't do this anymore." Chuck's smile faded. "Do what?" "This marriage, the lies, the cheating, the money problems. I'm done." Her voice was calm, firm. She had already spoken to a lawyer. She wasn't asking permission. She was telling him. And that's when Chuck's face changed. Denise had seen him angry before, but this was different. His eyes darkened. Then came the words she never expected. "You leave me, and you leave with nothing." Denise laughed coldly. "I'm taking half, Chuck. You can't stop me." And that was it. The moment she sealed her fate, Chuck knew he had one chance to get rid of Denise without suspicion. A perfect alibi, a perfect cover, and the opportunity presented itself. A vacation. Denise had booked a trip to Cancun, Mexico, hoping it would help them reconnect. Chuck saw it as the perfect time to get rid of her. No witnesses, no police breathing down his neck. A clean disappearance. He just had to play his part. Pretend everything was normal. Pretend he was still the devoted husband. Pretend like he wasn't about to kill his wife. The night before they left for Mexico, Chuck was sweeter than usual. He cooked dinner, held her hand, made promises about fixing their marriage. Denise wanted to believe him. She let her guard down. And that was her mistake. Denise had no idea that when she boarded that plane to Mexico, she would never come back. At least, not the way she expected. She thought she was walking into a chance at happiness, but she was walking straight into a grave. The first few days felt almost normal. Beach walks, candlelit dinners, holding hands like they were still in love. Chuck was saying all the right things. "We just lost our way, baby. We can fix this." Denise wanted to believe him, but at night when she lay beside him, she felt something was off. Chuck had always been a good liar, and Denise knew a performance when she saw one. It happened on the fourth night. Denise had been going over their finances. Chuck was drinking again. She confronted him. "I saw the bank statements, Chuck." He didn't answer, just took another sip of whiskey, his jaw tight. "You drained our savings, took out another loan. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Chuck scoffed. "It's my money too." Denise's voice rose. "Not anymore. I'm done cleaning up your messes. I'm filing for divorce when we get home." Chuck's hand tightened around his glass. "You're not taking half of my money, Denise." "It's not your money, it's ours." Denise was shaking now, furious. She had spent years holding this marriage together. For what? For a man who never cared? For someone who saw her as disposable? She turned to walk away, and that's when Chuck snapped. Before Denise could take another step, Chuck grabbed his suitcase, unzipped the side pocket, and pulled out his .38 revolver. Denise turned, her eyes widening. "Chuck!" The first gunshot ripped through her shoulder. The second hit her in the stomach. She collapsed, gasping, bleeding, her eyes wide with shock. Chuck just stood there, frozen. Denise's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her body convulsed. She was still alive. Chuck's breath came in ragged gasps. He hadn't planned on it happening like this. Not inside the house, not this messy. He watched as Denise tried to crawl toward him, tried to reach for his leg. Her lips moved. Chuck leaned in. "Please." Something inside him snapped. She wasn't dead yet. He had to finish it. Chuck acted fast. He grabbed a throw blanket from the couch and wrapped her in it. Her body was still warm, still twitching. He dragged her outside. The vacation home sat on the outskirts of Cancun, near the jungle. No neighbors, no cameras. He had already picked out the spot, a small clearing in the woods. He had planned to do it differently, maybe poison her drink, maybe make it look like an accident. But this was messy, and Chuck hated messes. The dirt was soft. He dug as fast as he could, his muscles burning. The moonlight illuminated Denise's face. Her eyes were still open, still pleading. Chuck forced himself to look away. He dropped her into the grave, tossed her phone in with her, and began shoveling dirt over the woman who had once been his wife. Chuck went back inside, his heart still pounding. Blood on the floor, on the couch, on his hands. He worked methodically. Bleach, towels, trash bags. Denise's clothes were burned. The gun was disassembled and buried miles away. By morning, the house looked untouched, like nothing had ever happened. The next day, Chuck walked into the local police station, tears in his eyes, a frantic husband, a man in pain. "My wife, she's missing." He told them about the argument, said Denise had stormed out, that she was emotional, stressed, that she probably needed space. The Mexican authorities didn't seem too concerned. Tourists went missing all the time. They'd probably return home after some time. No sign of foul play, no reason to investigate. And just like that, Chuck walked away, a free man. Chuck returned to Atlanta, a grieving husband. He held vigils, played the part perfectly. And when the sympathy faded, he cashed in Denise's life insurance, their joint accounts, every cent she had ever saved. Within a year, Chuck was remarried, living his best life. In the shallow grave, Denise Garrison woke up to the weight of the earth pressing down on her chest. Her head throbbed, her lungs burned. She tried to scream, but her mouth filled with dirt. Panic set in. She wasn't dead. Chuck had buried her alive. Instinct took over. Denise forced her arms to move, clawing at the loose soil above her. Her fingers scraped against roots and rocks, tearing her skin. Every movement felt like lifting a mountain. Her body screamed in protest, but she kept going. One handful of dirt, then another. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. She didn't know how deep she was, didn't know how much longer she could last. But she knew one thing. If she stopped, she would die here. Her fingers found air. She clawed harder, kicking, pushing, gasping. She broke through the ground, her body half emerging from the shallow grave. Her entire frame trembled. Her vision swam. She couldn't pass out, not now. Denise forced herself onto her hands and knees. Somehow, some way she got to her feet. She had no idea where she was, but she had one goal: get away. Denise stumbled forward, every step sending a fresh wave of agony through her body. She didn't know how long she walked. The road ahead was deserted. Her body weighed 1,000 pounds. Then headlights. A car. Denise tried to wave her arms, but her body refused. She collapsed, her knees hitting the pavement. The vehicle skidded to a stop. A man jumped out. Spanish words swirled around her. She tried to respond, but her body gave out. The world faded. Denise woke up in a hospital bed. Bright lights, beeping monitors, a soft, rhythmic hum of voices in the background. Her body ached everywhere. She tried to move, but she was too weak. A nurse appeared, her eyes wide with shock. "Can you hear me?" Denise blinked. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. The nurse hurried away, calling for a doctor. Moments later, a man in a white coat appeared, checking her vitals. Denise couldn't understand what was happening. She opened her mouth, trying to ask the most basic question: "Where am I?" But no words came, because she didn't know who she was. The doctors told her the truth. She had been in a coma for 13 months. Her injuries had been severe. Internal bleeding, broken ribs, a skull fracture. She had no ID, no fingerprints on record. No one had come looking for her. She was simply a missing woman with nowhere to go. Over time, Denise learned to walk again. She gained strength. The hospital staff called her Maria. She didn't recognize it, but she accepted it, a new name, a new identity. She was released into a shelter for displaced women. She found work cleaning small hotels. She built a simple, quiet life. No past, no future, just existing. Until one day, everything came back. It happened in a grocery store. Denise was bagging oranges when a man's laugh caught her attention. It wasn't his voice, but it was his tone. Chuck's tone. Something inside her cracked. Images flashed in her mind: a vacation home, a heated argument, a gun, a shallow grave. Denise gasped, and then it all came rushing back. Her name, her life, her murder. She wasn't Maria. She was Denise Garrison, and the man who tried to kill her was still out there. The moment her memories came back, Denise knew what she had to do. She walked straight to a local police station in Mexico. A woman missing for 8 years suddenly remembering her past. The officers were skeptical until she said her real name, Denise Garrison. One officer froze at the name. He typed something into his computer, and then his eyes widened. "You've been dead for 8 years." The words hit her harder than the gunshots ever had. Dead? How could she be dead if she was standing right here? She leaned over the counter, staring at the police screen. Her own face looked back at her. A missing persons case, closed, presumed dead. The last known sighting, Mexico. Denise booked a one-way flight to Atlanta. No hesitation, no second thoughts. She didn't know what she'd do when she got there, didn't know what she'd say, but she had to see him, had to see the life he built after killing her, had to look him in the eyes, had to show him she was still alive. Denise stepped out of the rideshare car, her heart pounding. There it was, her home, or at least it used to be. It looked different. New flowers, a fresh coat of paint. Chuck had moved on. She had been fighting for her life, and he had been here, living like nothing happened. She climbed the porch steps and knocked. She heard footsteps inside, a muffled voice. Then the door creaked open, and there he was. Chuck. Older, a little grayer, but still Chuck. His eyes met hers and his face turned white. Denise took a slow step forward, tilting her head. "You're not going to invite me in?" Chuck's mouth opened, but no sound came out. This wasn't real. This wasn't possible. He had put her in the ground. He had watched the dirt cover her. He had spent 8 years living with the certainty that she was never coming back. Yet here she was, looking alive, strong, unshaken. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorframe, steadying himself. "Denise," he finally managed to whisper. Her eyes flickered. "Not happy to see me?" Chuck glanced past her, searching for something. Police, a setup, a camera crew. There had to be a catch, but it was just her. Denise's voice was quiet, steady, no anger, no screaming, just one question. "Why did you do it?" Chuck's brain scrambled for an answer, an excuse, a way out. "You left, Denise." Denise's expression didn't change. "No, Chuck, you tried to kill me." Chuck took a step back, gripping the door like he could somehow close this moment off. Denise took a step forward. "You left me in that grave." Chuck let out a breathy laugh, a nervous chuckle. His mind flipped into damage control. "Listen, I don't know what happened to you, but you left. You ran off, and now you're back, acting like I did something to you." Denise's smile faded. She folded her arms. "You shot me, Chuck." Chuck shook his head. "No, Denise. You were emotional. We fought. You stormed out. I reported you missing." Denise took a step closer. "You buried me, Chuck." Chuck stilled. Denise's voice dropped. "You buried me." Denise reached into her purse, her fingers brushing against the cold metal before she pulled out her phone. Her voice was steady, almost emotionless as she spoke. "I'd like to report an attempted murder." In the distance, sirens screamed through the night. Across from her, the man who had once sworn to love her let his hands fall to his sides. He knew. He had always known this moment would come. The interrogation room was freezing. Denise sat across from the lead detective, her hands motionless on the table. 8 years. That's how long she had waited for this. How long she had carried the weight of a crime that was never supposed to be uncovered. But tonight, the silence shattered. She told them everything. The officers didn't hesitate. They had everything they needed: a motive, the money, the grave that was never deep enough, the missing bullet, the victim who refused to stay buried. When they entered the room, cuffs in hand, Chuck barely reacted. He had lived 8 years on borrowed time, but time had finally run out. Chuck Garrison had nowhere left to run. His sentence was swift, life in prison with no chance of parole. But justice doesn't undo the past. It doesn't erase the horror. The man she had once trusted, the man she had loved, had tried to bury her alive. And for nearly a decade, he had walked free, spending her money, living in her house, sleeping soundly in their bed. But the past doesn't stay buried forever. And tonight, Chuck had nowhere left to hide. If someone you love tried to kill you, could you ever forgive them? Or are some crimes beyond redemption? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.